I'm Marshall Schmidt. I was president of the Rotary Club of Chicago between 2019 and 2020. And our president nominee was supposed to preside today. Our president is in Germany, and our president-elect is at the large club conference in San Jose, California. So why don't I just get started and introduce David Hirsch, who I understand is going to introduce the speaker. Is that correct, David?
Yes.
And why don't we go ahead so that we don't take up too much of our speaker's time? You can go ahead, David.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that very brief introduction.
I'm sorry, David. Just trying to keep things moving.
Okay. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Mitch Daniels, who's an American academic administrator, businessman, author, and retired politician. A Republican, Mitch served as the 49th governor of Indiana from 2005 to 2013. And since 2013, Mitch has been the president of Purdue University. So by way of a little background, Mitch was born in Pennsylvania. His dad's parents are immigrants from Syria. And in 1959, at his age 10, his family moved to Indiana. In 1971, Mitch earned a bachelor's degree from the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University. He initially studied law at the Indiana McKinney School of Law in Indianapolis. And after accepting a job with the newly elected Indiana Senator Richard Lugar, he transferred to Georgetown University Law Center, where he earned his Juris Doctorate. From 1977 to 1982, Mitch served as Senator Lugar's chief of staff, during which time he met Sherry Herman, who he married in 1978. The couple has 4 adult daughters. From 1983 to 1986, he served a number of political positions before becoming CEO of the Hudson Institute, a conservative think tank, in 1987. From 1990 to 2000, he worked at Eli Lilly, Indiana's largest employer, largest company. And in 2000, President-elect George W. Bush nominated Mitch to serve as the director of the Office of Management and Budget. He was confirmed in January by the U.S. Senate with a vote of 100-0. And Mitch, was that your highest was that the high water mark for your popularity?
Well, it'd be hard to exceed the vote percentage, but we'll consider it just a bit of grace on the part of Congress at the time.
There you go. Okay, well, carrying on. In 2004, he was elected governor after traveling around Indiana to all 92 counties via RV, beating incumbent Governor Joe Kernan, the first incumbent governor to lose an election in Indiana since 1892. He was also reelected in 2008. And since 2013, he has served as president of Purdue University, where he has led a transformation of that university. Earlier this year, he announced his retirement, which will take place in January 2023. Mitch is also the author of 3 books, including the most recent, Aiming Higher, Words That Changed a State. Mitch, thank you so much for being with the Rotary Club of Chicago today.
Delighted to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. My dad, as I sit here reflecting, was an active Rotarian, and as a matter of pure coincidence, I haven't been with a Rotary Club in quite a long time, and I'm going to be in 2 days. As a favor to another good friend, I'm going to speak at one in the northern part of our state tomorrow. I understand the assignment to be to try to illuminate this much discussed and often controversial world of higher education, which I've inhabited now for a decade. And like many audiences, there are 2 or 3 topics you're very curious about. I'm going to show you in rapid succession 3 data points and then make a few comments before we go to your questions. So Shelby, I'm told that you are driving, and if you would favor us with the first of the 3 slides, please. Here you see something that won't come as news to you unless the degree continues to surprise you. But the rise in cost of higher education has been a stunning one The only three categories in the national indices of cost of living that have gone up faster than healthcare are college tuition, college room and board, and college books. And here you see the extent of that, the extent to which it has outpaced inflation. And next, please. Here's the reality staring in the face of higher education. Much of that huge run-up we just looked at was made possible by ever escalating levels of enrollment. First, the baby boom generation, then the baby boom echo, as some have called it, produced lots and lots of children. People were told you got to go to college. Rates of at least attempting to go to college went up against those bigger numbers, and you had lots and lots of demand for the product. Colleges responded because they could to that demand by raising prices. Here you'll see the problem which is on the minds of people in this sector, which is that we don't have very many children in this country anymore. You know where fertility rates have gone. There's no relief coming from these numbers. They're baked in by reality. And so the number of high school graduates is going to drop. Meanwhile, the percentage of those graduates who say they intend to go to college has taken a downturn, a severe one in the last 2 or 3 years, but it's been declining for some time. And on top of that, many of these high school graduates are really not ready for college. They are graduating, I'm sad to say, with artificially inflated grades and frequently inadequate skills to do at least real college level work, which is another problem we can talk about. And then one more. Thank you, Shelby. So here's something that's been in your news a lot over the last couple, 3 years, and that's that in order to pay these ever escalating costs, young people have been taking out lots and lots of debt. They were encouraged to do that by, among others, their governmental representatives. And so you know, and we can talk about it if it's of interest, that the federal government, having made a complete hash of this topic from end to end, has continued that pattern by, as they say, canceling what will be at least 600 billion, if not much more, of this debt. I say I put cancellation in quotes because, of course, the debt's not being canceled, it's being transferred to taxpayers, including, ironically, in the future, many of the young people who ran it up in the first place. So thank you, Shelby, for those slides. Let me just say a few more things, and then please direct the conversation, David and others, through your questions. Summing up what is a very, very long and multifaceted problem, I will just suggest that higher ed faces both a value problem and a values problem. And one way or another, most of the things that bother people today, citizens, students, and their families, can be fit into one of those two boxes. By value, I'm talking about the cost run up we just discussed. You know, here at Purdue University, we've tried to go a different route. We have, as we sometimes say, let's, instead of asking people to adjust their family budgets to our level of spending, how about we adjust our level of spending to their family budgets? This is year 10 in a row in which we have not changed our tuition for in-state or out-of-state students. And meanwhile, we have lowered the cost of room and board from the second highest in the Big Ten to the lowest in the Big Ten. And when you roll it all together, our students' families have saved over $1 billion that we would have collected if we had simply gone with the flow and raised those rates at at national or conference averages. I will say, as worked, although we did this because we thought it was a right and appropriate thing to do, it's worked out well from a business standpoint. Because you could say our market share has grown dramatically. Our student body is 30% larger than it was when all that started. And you all, the business folks in this audience, know that a strong top line enables a lot of success. I can't resist telling you, I used to get in trouble all the time in my last job, when I go to Illinois, people would ask me to contrast what was going on there with what was going on in our state. And that was my job, of course, to accent things like that. People still remember me saying on WLS in answer to one such question that it was like living next door to the Simpsons to be where we were. But I can't resist saying on this occasion, telling you that while Illinois has always been the #1 source of out-of-state students for us, proximity made that natural, but it's really exploded in recent years. Last year's freshman class had more than 1,000 Illinois students in it, and out of an entering class of just over 10,000. I greet them cheerfully all the time when I bump into them on campus, and I always refer to them as refugees, and I tell them we have a very welcoming asylum policy here in Indiana. So, in any event, the issue in higher ed, people talk about the cost, but we've always reminded ourselves at Purdue that it's really value. We will not sacrifice quality for cost. And I always say the central equation of life is quality over price, whatever it is one is consuming, and that value is what we're always pursuing. So we have invested very, very heavily in people, faculty, and in facilities, and in those services that we think facilitate academic success. But not all schools have, and I think slowly, belatedly, the consumer, that is to say, students and their families, have taken a closer look and concluded that they're not getting sufficient value for what they're being asked to pay. The other box I mentioned, values, goes to matters of free speech and enforced conformity of thought, which sadly is the case on far too many campuses. And this is, let me salute the University of Chicago, which has always been a leader and renewed its leadership not too long ago by issuing an updated statement of principles. We at Purdue quickly Xeroxed it. I called Dr. Zimmer and asked him if he'd mind if another school not only imitated, but simply Xeroxed what they had done, because I thought it was so good. And he said that'd be great by them, and our board immediately did it. But unfortunately, schools like our two are still more unique than they should be. In fact, our practice should be universal, not just because freedom of speech and freedom of thought is a Central American Bill of Rights freedom, but on top of that, freedom of inquiry is at the heart of the academic enterprise. Schools like ours are supposed to be here to advance knowledge and then share it with younger generations. And knowledge doesn't advance when everybody thinks the same thing. And knowledge advances only through the collision of ideas, the competition of ideas. And frequently it's the dissident or the heretic who produces the new breakthrough or the new insight. So anyway, the sad fact that on way too many campuses, you've reached a point of homogeneity in outlook. It's often an extreme outlook, very distant from the viewpoints and values of many or most Americans. And this, I think, also has contributed to skepticism and loss of public support. Let me wrap up by just saying that I hope we work our way out of these things. The American system of higher education has been a great boon to this country. It remains, with all its defects, an attractive one to people elsewhere in the world. We have to tightly control the number of international students on our campus because the demand from other places is still very high. But so I think it's very important that higher ed reform itself as need be, shape up on these fronts and all that they comprise. And I never skip a chance in front of a great audience like this. I know that many people on this call are in positions of influence on various schools. Your trustees, your donors, your widely respected alums, please use that influence to press dear old alma mater to make the kind of improvements that will keep it a good institution, and keep us collectively the finest set of such institutions anywhere. Thank you, David. Glad to take questions.
Yeah, well, thank you for your remarks, Mitch. The things that I took away from them, the two highlights were that there's an estimated $1 billion of savings over the last decade that has accrued to the students, the families that have put their loved ones there at Purdue, which is remarkable, right? I think money talks, and I think that you've really delivered from that perspective. And then the comment you made about knowledge advances because of the collision of ideas, right? I think is very powerful, which is we need to respect people's differences and embrace those, because I think we have a lot more in common than what separates us. And it happens a lot in those formative years when young people are in the university or academic environment, that their values and views of the world are shaped. So I just want to say thank you. And I don't take offense to your remarks about the borders and the refugees that you referred to. I don't think building a wall would be very effective between the states. But as a native Chicagoan who's barely left the state of Illinois, because I went to the University of Illinois undergrad and Northwestern University graduate school, and other than some business travel and some vacation, I've literally never left the state of Illinois. I was expecting one of our 5 children, maybe more, to go to the University of Illinois. And it came down to number 5. The others had all gone out of state. And lo and behold, I became a Hoosier dad. So I guess I have one of those refugees that you're referring to. And I'm very proud to be a Hoosier dad. Just an extraordinary educational experience that she had there. So with that little personal aside, I wanted to just take a step back, as opposed to just jumping right in and talking about education and these sort of heavier topics, and reflect on how was your growing up in Indiana? How did that shape your worldview of things?
No, I'd actually grown up in the American South. We lived, I was born in Pennsylvania, but only so my mom could hatch me in the hometown hospital. And as soon as I could, we traveled down to where my dad was working in Georgia. We lived in Tennessee and Georgia till I was 10. So the thing I always remember about coming to the Midwest was, in the American South in late 1950s, they hadn't surrendered yet. I mean, we all studied, we didn't play cowboys and Indians. We refought the, as we called it then, the War of the Northern Aggression. And, so that was a huge learning experience. And my dad came home. We had moved a couple of times. That wasn't new. He came home one night, told my sister and I that we're going to move again. We said, well, okay, Daddy, where? He tells us Indiana. And I said, Daddy, Yankees live there. Well, that was a jolt. The other jolt was coming to a place so flat, that I'd grown up in the middle of mountains, and that was, topologically, that was, or topographically, that was different. But I'll tell you another thing that was just since you asked, we moved into an almost all Jewish neighborhood, and that was a wonderful experience for me. Today we would say it was my first encounter with genuine diversity. I didn't know anything about the Jewish people, the Jewish faith. We happened to live close to 2 temples, and therefore the community center. And so all my playmates and so forth, probably third of my grade school. And so those were all the kind of broadening experiences that I think are really good for for a kid. It can, I suppose I wouldn't have wanted to move 2 or 3 more times, and I was glad we stayed there through the end of my high school. But those just free associating, those were some things I remember well.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. And before we jump into the topic of higher ed, which you made some really enlightening remarks about already, I'm wondering, when you look back on your career, approaching retirement, could you have imagined that you would have served in all sectors of the society like you have? What was it when you were, this young Princeton graduate? What was it that you think your career was going to do? Where was it going to take you?
No, I wouldn't have imagined it. If someone had some fortune teller had told me what was coming, I'd have been thrilled. I think I've been very, very fortunate to have extensive experiences in I always say all 3 sectors, the public, the private, and the nonprofit. I will say, and I've said countless times, the one I would trade away last was my private sector years. That was the longest stretch of anything. It's very common, David, when somebody's making some overly generous introduction like you did, sometimes they just skip over that entirely. But in fact, life in what I think is fair to call the real world, the world of competition, the world that measures you, is I think an essential preparation. I hear all the time from great talented young people and others. They say, "Gosh, I'm really interested in going into politics or public life." I always tell them, that's a good thing for a citizen to want to give some time to city, state, or country. But I say, you'll be a lot better at it and you'll be better for it if you have spent an extensive period of time in private life, in the productive sector of society, and where you can develop some skills, you can build some credibility, and believe me, I'll tell them the most useful lessons, most useful to me in the job I'm in now, the last job I was in, anywhere else, are those I learned in business, in either of the 2 businesses I spent most of my time in.
Yeah, well, thank you for pointing that out. I think it's been a remarkable career. So you've been the leader of one of the most respected higher education institutions in the country, and you've done some things that I think most of your peers would seem to be very controversial. You made reference to one of those, which is not increasing the tuitions and fees, which is if there are other universities, large universities that have done that, I'm unaware of it. And I'm going to guess, not knowing all the details, that wasn't something that everybody at the university, when you were in your first year of your presidency, were in favor of. And I'm wondering, how did you overcome some of the objection, right, to go against the general rule or the way of doing things?
So you're asking really about the reaction here at Purdue as opposed to at other institutions. Yeah, I would say that it was a novel idea. I have to tell you, I think people will be interested. When I first suggested in a meeting with our enrollment people, I hadn't been here very long. It was the springtime of my first year. It was getting to be time to make the decision about the next couple of years' charges. And I raised the question, I said, I think I've had enough of a look at the books here. It's not clear to me that we just have to raise tuition or fees. What about a 1-year timeout? Believe me, that's all I had in mind at the outset. They had raised tuition here at 36 straight years. And please, nobody chuckle, because that was going on at every other school that I'm aware of, every comparable school. And so the reaction was fascinating. Of course, there were some people, that oh, we'll have to turn out the lights. We just can't do without the extra money. And I'd heard that a lot before. I knew not to pay much attention to that. I'd heard it in business. I'd heard it in government for sure. Though the more interesting reaction came from the enrollment person, very, very able woman who was leading us there at the time, really knew her business. And she said, gee, Mitch, if you do that, people will think we don't have confidence in our product. What she meant was people were associating it, and did for a long, long time, cost with quality, because there was no other measure. This is one way higher ed has, I'm going to say, gotten away with what it has. There's been no real way to tell whether a philosophy degree from school A is better or worse than whatever was taught at school B. And so people did correlate sticker price with quality. If it costs more, it must be better. So I remember saying at the time, boy, Pam, I just landed here on Mars, you know, to me, at least, this alien environment. I said, but let me tell you, back on Earth, that's not what they're thinking. Back there, they're asking, what the heck is all this money for? What am I getting for it? And so anyway, there was natural skepticism. I didn't quarrel for a moment with people's, take exception to people having questions. But anyway, let me finish by saying that having done it once and then finding we could, gosh, there's no reason we can't do it again, and then each year successfully. I believe it has an overwhelming support in the Purdue community. I think people are really proud of it. I guarantee you that our alums are. Obviously, it's very popular now with years of students. We've had 6 or 7 cohorts go all the way through Purdue without ever seeing a price increase. And really our whole community, faculty, staff, and others. Remember, we're a land grant school. We're supposed to be here to widen the opportunities for people to achieve higher education. So, you know, initially, yes. And some of the questions were perfectly natural, but it didn't take too long before people kind of got the spirit. I like to say, on a campus where, thank goodness, people argue about everything and disagree about all kinds of things, this is one thing I think almost everybody here agrees with, that, you know, this is, we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, well, thanks for pointing that out. And there is a mentality that you get what you pay for, right? You know, it's more of like a consumer product mentality, right? You don't want to cut corners. But I think that what I've witnessed over the last 10 years is that, you know, you've been a pioneer, right, in this area. And I'm wondering, when you're rubbing elbows with your peers, the presidents of these other universities, top universities around the country, what type of feedback are you getting, good or bad?
Well, we get a lot of how do you do it questions. When I'm around folks with this job, which doesn't happen that often, but people are always very cordial. I don't know what they say when I'm not around. But I will say that we have never once passed judgment on anybody else's decisions. We've never prescribed what Purdue is doing for anybody else. One of the great virtues of that network of schools that I was praising is its variety. And schools are different, and that's a good thing. So what's right for us and our mission will not be for many others. We understand that. So I hope people have taken it in that spirit.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving a very politically correct answer, which you have a little experience with. But all joking aside, some of these universities are building up massive endowments, multi-billion, tens of billions of dollars worth of endowments. And, you know, I guess at what point does the university come to the conclusion that, hey, you know, we're taking enough money from our students vis-a-vis tuition, room and board, and our alumni, you know, with these generous donations to, you know, essentially maybe make the education free, or, why would it be so difficult to freeze prices? Am I missing something? I'm just trying to approach this as a business person.
No, you're not missing anything. I mean, I will say there are very few schools in the position you're talking about. They're very prominent. We all notice them, and they're because they're very noticeable, but there aren't very many of them. And you're asking a very legitimate question. Enough people ask it that here and there, some of those schools are responding to it. Some of the wealthiest of them have said, well, no tuition for students under a certain income and so forth. Took them a long time to get there, and but I think they feel some real pressure, not just the public opinion, but you'll have noticed there've been legislative suggestions of taxing their endowments, and that got their attention.
Gotcha.
But most schools are not in that position, and I'm very, very worried about some of our fine smaller institutions who have participated in the cost run up, raised their fees while they could, don't have some enormous endowment to fall back on. And I think, again, given the headwinds that I showed on those slides, and we've talked about a little here, I'm real worried. Of course, across the Midwest, this is where so many of those fine little schools are. They were built here as the nation grew westward. And some of them, I think, are in and tough times and headed for tougher.
Well, I'd like you to spend a minute or two reflecting on some of the other transformations that have taken place at Purdue. I think one of the more significant of which has been the embrace of online education. I'm wondering if you can share with our audience the bigger decisions that you made along that way, and some of the acquisitions or mergers that have taken place.
Yeah, sure.
Build the student body from tens of thousands to, I think it's over 100,000, isn't it?
It is. You're referring to our purchase of a former proprietary online school, what used to be known as Kaplan, is now Purdue Global. And business audiences will quickly recognize our decision to do that, which got a lot of attention at the time and stirred some, again, very natural concerns for a while on this campus and elsewhere. But business audiences will recognize this as a pretty classical build or buy decision. I had been very dissatisfied with myself, but with our failure to progress very far into online education. We didn't really know what we were doing, and we were proving it. And so an opportunity arose to buy an established operation, and we did that. We did it for two reasons. One, I just mentioned, so that we could acquire the skills and experience in how to deliver education in this very different way. Maybe even more important, this became, I thought, the 21st century fulfillment of our land grant assignment that I mentioned a little bit ago. It came with the awareness, from the awareness that in this century, expanding the opportunities for higher education could not stop at age 22 or 22 plus graduate school. This is a very astute audience. Many of you will know, but most Americans don't. There are more than twice as many Americans today who started college and didn't finish as there are all the students on all the campuses we pay so much attention to. I'm not even talking about people who didn't get a shot or didn't attempt college in the first place. I'm talking about people who went a certain distance and stopped. And so Purdue Global and schools like it really are aimed at that audience. And it's a huge, I think it's a very huge opportunity for the country if we can find ways to help these folks. Societally will benefit, they will benefit enormously as individuals. When one of the most moving experiences I can have in this job is to attend a Purdue Global commencement, where you'll see grandparents graduating literally alongside the children, or even in one case, I remember a grandchild, you'll see lots of single moms. A majority of our students are first generation and minority, and average age 33. Very different population than the one we concentrate on and the one that's been our historical mission here. So I say we can't be a genuine land grant school in this century if we don't attempt to serve that population too. And that's what that one was all about. And again, we did it in a more direct way than I think we ever would have, trying to somehow grow our way into it.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. And it sort of begs the question about the future of higher education. And there's a question that Marshall Schmidt put in the chat, which is many people see job training as playing an increasingly greater role in education. And what's your view of that?
Before I say anything about my view, I'll just tell you, it is the view of the vast majority of those going to college today, that they're going to learn something that will help them get a good job and provide for themselves as adults. I happen to be a big advocate of the liberal arts, of a broad education. We're trying to make certain that's part of any Purdue student's education. By the way, one thing that's changed a lot in the last 10 years, we've become the most STEM-centric large school I know about. 70% of our graduates this spring were in engineering, one of the sciences, something under the category we call STEM. I was just looking today at the data on our graduates. Their average starting salary, close to $63,000, many of them starting in six figures. So I guarantee you that that's why most of them are coming to us. Now, I do think it's a mistake, and we try to make certain they see it the same way, not to, even if you're studying some of the most rigorous curricula we have, I always tell them, don't miss a chance to read some of the greatest things ever written, and to spend some time learning, thinking about how to think about the world, how to think about tough problems. So we're trying to keep that balance in there. But whatever view of higher ed any of us might have, that's what students today are bringing. And at these prices, you know, they're entitled to want to know, if I go there and study that, what's likely to happen to me professionally.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Before we conclude, I'd like you to make reference to what is generically known as the student debt crisis. There's been, some pretty big numbers thrown around about this debt forgiveness, and you made reference earlier in your remarks that we're just shifting the responsibility away from individuals who took out these loans to the general population through our tax dollars. And I'm wondering, is there another way, or are there some other ways to address the situation?
There are, and let me concentrate on that, because if I get started on my views about the action that was taken, I'll find it hard to be calm and dispassionate. I was asked by the Wall Street Journal the week before last to write on this subject, so I did. And anybody who's interested can go look that little essay up. But let me just focus here on the end of your question. Was there a better way? Yes, there was and is. And that is that schools like ours ought to be at least partially at risk or on the hook for default by their students. I guarantee it would shape a lot of them up in a hurry in terms of what they were charging. Don't charge as much because kids won't borrow as much. One reason for the charges, it's well documented, been researched over and over again. You infuse any market with that degree of subsidy and prices are going up. By most analyses, something like 2/3 of every new dollar of subsidies was pocketed by the colleges in higher prices. So part of the right answer, at least, would be to charge back to the schools some portion of what their graduates either didn't have the market marketable skills to pay off, or didn't have the character to do so. And we're supposed to be developing both here. And I always have thought of it as a breach of warranty issue, that if a school confers a diploma to a student, it's supposed to say something about that student's readiness for productive, responsible adulthood. And if it turns out that wasn't the case, then maybe there's a bit, find a crass way to say it, a defect, product defect issue. And so that would certainly be a part of, to me, of the answer. I think the government taking the whole thing over, which happened in 2010 or 11, was a huge mistake, provably so. The president at the time told us all they were going to make a big profit doing that. And instead, $600+ billion of dead loss. Really very sorry example, a very sorry piece of public policy history. But, just to finish here, the program's still there. And this, what they just did is going to make it worse. Everybody here knows the concept of moral hazard. And, that's why it's not generally a good idea to have multiple early retirement programs. When people decide there's another one coming, they hold out for it. Same thing's happening going to happen in student debt, I'm afraid. On that chart I showed, I should have made the point. Yes, canceling or shifting to somebody else, $600 billion will temporarily lower the amount outstanding. But all projections are it's going to go right back where it was within 4 or 5 years.
Okay, well, there's one more question in the chat that I'd like to try to summarize. I'll just read it. It's probably easier so I don't miss anything. The question is, about 20 years ago, there was an assumption that educators didn't know how to manage colleges and universities. And here we are with all these issues you just observed. What major positive and negative changes have you seen in your extensive career in higher ed?
We've just discussed some of the less fortunate changes. If you're asking about, if the questioner is asking about leadership, there's been some movement toward, they're usually described as outsiders, people like me. I'm not sure that's a complete answer. I think sometimes it can work and sometimes not. There are certainly examples of people who are, professional educators who led schools very successfully. I do think that it's very important to have, at least on a leadership team, a number of people who come from other sectors. Here, Purdue, it's most of us. But I think a good mixture of people who have grown up in this environment with people, particularly on the business side, who ask questions you would ask in a competitive and more competitive environment, has proven very effective. My last 2 CFOs, one of them came from a very, very successful Chicago-based business, a company you'd all recognize if I mentioned it right now. Had never spent a day in higher ed, was invaluable at shaping up, just doing some of those things that most of you would say, gosh, obvious, but weren't to people who had not been fortunate enough to have business experience like he and I had.
Is there a reason you don't want to mention the name of the company?
Well, I don't think it's necessary. I'll just say that he was a terrific business CFO, and I didn't know him before, but he was just the kind of person I was looking for. And thank goodness we tricked him into joining us, and he had a great, whatever it was, 6, 7, 8 year run.
Sounds like you were poaching and you don't want to be ID'd there, but we'll just leave it at that, Mitch. Okay. Well, I just want to say before we wrap it up, what are your plans for retirement, which are just now months away?
Well, I'm not using the dreaded R word. Please don't say it where my wife can hear it. I don't really know. I've never been a planner, and so if you know, whatever's next has always just shown itself, and usually it was something I didn't see coming. This job is a perfect example. So was the last job something I didn't plan or foresee. So I don't know. That might may have run out the string on those, maybe not. But for right now, you know, I've always believed that you have to. We were all taught to run through the tape, and I'm trying to do that. We just launched one very big initiative within the last month. I'm going to announce another one 2 days from today, a next set of big investments in one of our academic areas. And so there's plenty to keep me busy, and you know, we'll think about tomorrow when it gets here.
Okay, well, I'll just share a little pearl of wisdom from my grandmother to my grandfather when he was approaching his retirement, which she said, for better or for worse, but not for lunch.
Yes, I've heard that, and I would hear that again if I showed up at noontime.
Well, Mitch, I just want to say thank you for being so generous with your time. Thank you for your objective remarks. It's really been a pleasure having you with us today, and we wish you the best as it relates to the run to the tape and to January 1st, 2023, and then beyond.
Well, my thanks to you, David, and to the club.
Thanks again.
Okay, thank you, President Daniels. My name is Sarah Buck. I am a president-elect, and I just, as a fellow academic, I'm also faculty in higher ed at Chicago State University on the south side of Chicago. So I appreciate your time, and thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today and answer questions. You are welcome to stay with us for the remainder of our meeting, but I understand that you probably have another meeting that starts in 2 minutes. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, David, for doing such a nice job, as always, moderating with our speakers. So I have a few announcements that we're going to work our way through, and unfortunately, we're starting on a sad note. Many of us know John Wilhelm. He passed away on September 14th. And the service will be held this Sunday, September 25th at 1 p.m. at Union Church of Hinsdale, which is 137 South Garfield in Hinsdale. That information, I believe, is in the gyrator. But I'd like to take some time here to read a little bit about John in case you were unaware of him. And for those of us who did know him, just to take this moment in honor of him. The board and members of Rotary One would like to extend their deepest condolences to the family of Rotary One member John Marsh Wilhelm, who passed away on September 14th. John joined Rotary One on January 1st, 2012. He graciously took on numerous leadership roles with the club, serving as chair of the Community Service Committee, director of the Rotary One board, and secretary and trustee of the Rotary One Foundation board. He was also active in the club's Job 1 and Woman of the Year committees. John was a Ches Perry Fellow +11 and Paul Harris Fellow +5. He was a staunch supporter of a safe haven and Catholic charities. He loved tennis, and he will be missed. I mentioned already the memorial service, but again, I believe that's in the gyrator, and perhaps it might be in the chat as well. John is the one that elevated me to co-chair of the Community Service Committee, so I worked with him closely, and I was very sad to hear of his passing. So as is tradition with our club, we are going to take a few moments here to join in silence while I conduct a 3-bell service to honor his life and commitment to Rotary. Thank you. And I'm sure that many stories of fondness will be told about John in the next few weeks. So with that, let's move forward to any introduction of guests. So we'll open up the floor to any visiting international Rotarians. If you could just take a few moments to let us know where you are visiting from. And we're starting with international Rotarians. It's probably easiest to either raise your digital hand or just simply unmute. Do we have any international Rotarians today? Please go ahead.
Well, good afternoon in USA. It's almost midnight in India. I am Sanjay. I was a Rotary Foundation graduate scholar in London, Queen Mary University. And I have visited your club about 10 years ago. And I'm receiving messages from your club. I am a member of Rotary Club Saharanpur in North India, 150 kilometers north of New Delhi, at the foothills of Himalayas. So very happy to be in this club again, although virtually, and you all are welcome to visit India. My Rotary greetings to all of you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I see Liz Goggins, digital hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Great to be back. I haven't visited the club in a long time. I guess we're kind of on the fence here in the Virgin Islands because while we are US, we are in District 7020, which is an international district. We just went through Tropical Storm Fiona. She left St. Croix with 10 inches of rain and turned into a hurricane right as she was passing us. Of course, our concern now is Turks and Caicos, which is also part of our district here. So
yes, I've been following the news with that. So I'm glad that you are okay. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Sure.
Do we have any other international Rotarians? I didn't see any other hands raised. Okay. Do we have any visiting US Rotarians with us today? You can raise your digital hand. Any visiting US Rotarians? Not seeing any hands going up. Oh,
Can't find the button. Can't find the button for the
okay,
digital hand.
please
But
go
John
ahead.
Whitlock, Rotary Club of Naperville, back again. And
Okay.
thank you for the hospitality.
Good. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your company. Any other visiting US Rotarians? Yes, Linda Yates.
Hi, Linda Yates from the Rotary Club of LaGrange. I joined today because I am a Purdue graduate and wanted to hear what Mitch Daniels had to say about the university.
Good, perfect. Thank you for coming to see us today. Are there any other visiting US Rotarians? I don't see any other hands. Okay, do we have any guests of Rotary today? Okay, not seeing any hands or anyone frantically trying to unmute. So I will take that as a no. So let's move forward then. We are introducing a new segment to highlight member stories and successes. And we're asking members to send the office any information that you might have. It could be Rotary related, or it could be related to a promotion at work or something like that. So to our members, please share with the office any stories or successes that you might have. Travel, family, business news, anything like that. So you can be included in the upcoming gyrator and maybe even given a shout out during a meeting as well. So we have some volunteer opportunities coming up. The Community Service Committee Dictionary Project is getting started again, and we have the dictionary labeling event coming up. This will be on Tuesday, October 11th at 5 p.m. So 5 p.m. until 7:30 at Reby Moving and Storage in Lincoln Park. That information is also in the gyrator where you'll find the address. But again, what will happen at that event is we have all of these dictionaries that's part of our project for the third graders, and they need stickers. We have Rotary stickers that go into the dictionary that has the 4-way test and has a place for them to put their name. We have to put those stickers into the dictionary. So that is occurring on Tuesday, October 11th from 5 to 7:30 p.m. So please make note. The club is starting a Rotary One members only Slack group. After this meeting, I believe Neetha will be leading interested people with a demo of Slack. So you can join us after this meeting if you're interested in learning more and for a quick Slack demo. We have a voluntary contribution for Zoom that's going to begin on September 27th. Zoom participants will be asked to consider supporting Rotary One's virtual programs by making a voluntary contribution. The contributions will help cover the cost of providing virtual meetings and allow us to continue to offer our programs to our virtual audience. Next Tuesday's meeting is a hybrid meeting. So we'll have a face-to-face option at the Union League Club where you are welcome to join us, but it is a hybrid meeting. So there will also be the Zoom option as well. And that is our rescheduled Paul Vallis meeting. So please check the gyrator and the club website for upcoming meetings and club committee activity. There are due dates for registering for meetings, particularly the ones that are in person. So please keep an eye on those due dates if you are planning on attending in person. And the information I've read as far as our announcements can be found in the gyrator. And you can also find them on the Rotary One website. So our upcoming meetings in terms of committees. Oh, let's do upcoming meetings first. Okay, so this Friday and every Friday at 12, we have the Rotary One Networking Roundtable at the Union League Club, and have an informal gathering of individuals interested in some networking. I mentioned next Tuesday is the rescheduled Paul Vallis. That is a hybrid meeting. Our first Tuesday of each month is an evening meeting. So the first Tuesday in October is the 4th. That is a 5:30 p.m. meeting. We'll have Aaron Ailman from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning and Tour. And that meeting will be at the old post office on Van Buren. And then the October 11th meeting, we will have Amy Youngberg, the VP Programs Junior Achievement of Chicago, and that is also a hybrid meeting. So again, make sure you're up to date with the gyrator and those due dates for registering for those meetings. Upcoming committee meetings you have here on this slide. International Service Committee is up next. That's tomorrow already, Wednesday at 5:30. The next Community Service Committee meeting is on Thursday, October 6th at noon. We have a PR and Marketing Committee meeting on Friday, October 21st at 4. And then our two committees, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee and the Membership Committee, both of those meeting dates are to be determined. If anyone is interested in joining one of these committees, just reach out to one of the co-chairs to find out some more information. So with that, I believe I have reached the end of my announcements. Let's make sure I'm not missing any chat messages that are frantically telling me to do something. I think we're good. So it looks like Neetha is saying on October 7th. So October 7th, there is a Diversity Day event. I believe that information was in the gyrator as well, if I recall. So the gyrator is really your go-to for this information. So with that, that brings us to our 4-way test. And I just want to remind anyone who's interested in learning about Slack, you can stay on after the meeting and Neetha will lead you through that. But for now, You can either unmute or stay muted or let me do all the talking, but we'll go through the four-way test. So Rotary, the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? I thank all of you very much for taking time out of your day to spend with us at this Rotary meeting. I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.